welcome to my podcast. Thanks for joining. The fact that you're back for episode 2 is mind-blowing, number one. Or maybe it's your first time here. Welcome. We're getting to know me, and that's going to be a long process. But no matter what, we're also going to get to know God. So that's what this podcast is about. If you're listening and you'd like to watch on social media, my handle on both of those, do we say handle? I'm still learning. It's only episode 2, guys. Give me a break. My handle on both of them is From Baptist to Believer. Don't forget to like, share, subscribe, and here we go. Look what I got. Okay, the amount of time that it took me to set this up, and it was flopping all around town. It was an embarrassing amount of time that it took me to get it here, but I think we're sturdy now. So now I don't have to hold the microphone anymore. I'm a little bit concerned though, because I did just eat a tostada chip, basically like a big tortilla chip, but crunchier and more delicious. But now I'm paranoid because I realized on the last podcast that this beautiful microphone will literally pick up if you blink. Okay. So I'm sorry. I tried to edit out as much as I could, but I do breathe and I do just exist. So I'm going to try to do better, but good grief. You see, now I'm extra paranoid because I ate that giant tostada chip, and now I feel like that might be picking up. But I could always start ASMR, you know? I'm sure there's a weird niche for that. No, I don't want to do that. You know what I have thought about though? So fun fact, I have been unemployed. I have not had one single penny come in since November of 2023. It is August. But you know what? There's testimony in that because God is so good and God provides, and it's mind-blowing. Thank you to my ex-narcissist who put me in a financial bind and also committed synthetic identity theft. Allegedly. It's not alleged. It's not alleged because I have proof. We're not going to go off on that, but I have proof. I've seen it with my own eyes and I have record of it, and the mail is still coming to the house. So you forgot some. Anywho, but God is good. But you know, I do have a lot of business ideas. Let's talk about that. I would really like to somehow figure out how I can talk to you guys about business and finances and how to make the most of your money and things like that. I'm definitely not rich by any means. But God is really good. And I definitely am working towards hopefully one day. You know, I would just like to maybe order a pizza and not feel bad about it, or like not feel guilty. Like, that's it. I don't want to be rich, but I would like to not notice that my mortgage has come out. Or I don't want to be rich, but I just want to like buy a pair of earrings without feeling guilty. I don't want to be rich, but I don't want to cringe at Starbucks prices. Can they calm down? But we keep going. So, From Baptist to Believer. Why did I name my podcast that? I had recorded this for the end of the last podcast, but it didn't really flow. I tried to end that podcast like 3 times and I just kept talking. So if you ever met me in person, I need you to block out like a chunk of time. You see how loud was that? I bumped the microphone. Like you would need to block out a chunk of time. Unless you're boring, and then I'm just kidding. When I raised money for missions, that was like probably the hardest part of the job. Like I did missions right in Brazil. Let's talk a bit about that. I'm going to get back to what I'm saying, From Baptist to Believer and the why. When I did missions in Brazil, I had to basically go around to different churches and raise support, which is basically raising money. So you can raise like one-time donations, or you could raise monthly donations. Some people would donate anywhere from like $5 a month to churches would donate obviously like quite a bit more per month. But honestly, it's interesting. Oh my gosh, that's what we're going to talk about. We're talking about finances today because I have tried to restart this podcast like 3 times, and every time I'm like shifting back into finances. So let's talk about it. I just remembered something that God gave me last night, or maybe it was this morning. My schedule is off. You know why my schedule's off? Because I have not had a job since November. So That's been not fun. That's been not fun. It has definitely helped me to prioritize, and it has helped me to totally pretty much give up Amazon and Target. So if you ever want to quit an addiction, be wrongfully terminated from your employer, and then you will really cut back. No, it's been really difficult, but the cool thing is that God has really been providing. Like, he's been providing in ways that like I didn't really expect, or even in the moment sometimes I don't notice. I think a lot of times we're really blind to what God is doing until after we're like, that phrase, like hindsight's 2020. Like sometimes we're like, oh my goodness, times are so rough. We're like, oh, thank goodness for this. But we don't really realize sometimes until we stop and think back, like, wow, God really has done so much, and he really has provided. So we're going to talk about that. But I've had like business ideas. Like maybe I should use this mic. Honestly, I could crunch a tortilla chip in here. I wouldn't, because I feel like that would get really weird really fast. But there's like a lot of ways that you can make money without doing weird or illegal. There are victimless crimes, but it's still illegal. That was for a specific person. My ex-narc, he knows. The thing about narcissism is that they hoover and they stalk. And he might not hear it today, and he might not hear it next year. But he'll come back around and listen to it at some point, or have his little friends tell him about it. We're going to talk about narcissism too. Not today. I'm not in the mood. I am kind of in the mood, but I feel like God is telling me to talk about finances. So we're going to obey, because we learned in our last podcast to not be a Jonah. But yeah, the money situation has been hard, but I would really like to get to the point where I'm talking about finances on this podcast, because it is easier. It's easier to be financially free than I guess you would kind of think. I mean, this economy is not making it easy, but and things are only getting worse, it seems, but it is possible. And I'm not like for Dave Ramsey kind of thing. I think that's crazy. Which he's a millionaire and I'm not, so maybe you should take financial advice from him and not me. But I would like to talk about that. I would like to also eventually talk about like real estate investing. I just got my realtor's license in January. I passed on the first try. Yay me. Apparently that's hard to do. I don't know. But I had known already like quite a bit about investing properties, and like I had a pretty good understanding and concept of those things before I took the real estate class. So I think that really helped me. But I also did study. You got to put in the work. Listen, people, here's the thing. Sometimes we think that if God's in it, it's going to be easy. And that's just simply not the case. And I think that can lead me into something that happened. I posted last night a video about how it was like an analogy of how Christians sometimes are not the best representatives of Christ. And I use the example of like, we're Christians, so we're wearing a uniform and we're essentially representing Christ. I really think that God just like gives me sometimes ways to be able to explain things so that they're kind of relatable. I think that's cool about God. The analogy was to the non-believers. Imagine that you own a company and it's the best company on the planet and everything that you do is amazing. One of the perks of working for your company is that you have lifetime guarantee of employment unless you just like decide to quit. But other than that, you're guaranteed employment for life. And that's a perk of working for your company. So you have employees that some of them, they will put on the uniform as they're supposed to. They show up on time. They do like a spick and span job at whatever you've hired them to do. They're not perfect, but they're doing their best. And then the second group I mentioned would be people who like don't even put the uniform on at all. Like they are not even trying to wear the uniform. They don't want anything to do with it. And if they didn't say out loud that they worked for the company, then you would never know because they don't talk about it. They don't act like they work for that company. So you deal with them how you see fit. And then the third group was the people who wear the uniform, but they maybe show up dirty or they show up like they haven't washed their uniform. They stink. They're like a really bad representative of the company. And that would be an example of like Christians who run their mouth and say mean things in the comments. Specifically in that video, I was alluding to the Olympics because that was a hot topic at the time, but also we're about to go into election season. So it's also going to be really fun during that time. In that analogy, the company is Jesus, right? So, or Christianity, however you want to look at it. if you picture Jesus like that, he gives us an eternal position on his team with his company, and we are representatives of him while we are here on this earth. So if we're wearing the uniform, that's fine and all, but if you're wearing it and you're typing derogatory comments or you're saying mean things to people just because they don't believe or think exactly like you, you're doing damage to that reputation of Jesus. So that was kind of the analogy that I used. But someone commented and was like, I will wear my uniform when I no longer, I'm trying to remember how he worded it. I will wear my uniform when I no longer have to sell my plasma in order to make ends meet. That's honestly, that's very understandable, right? Because you think like, why would God put you in like a bad situation like that? Like no one wants to sell their plasma to make ends meet. And the Bible says God will supply all your needs. So why should you have to sell your plasma? Well, you know how my last podcast, I mentioned how I've been through a lot of things, and I think that it's so I can relate to people. Oh shoot, I feel like tears coming and I don't want to cry. So let me get it together. God only knows what that's going to sound like in this microphone. Okay, pull it together. Remember in my last podcast, I mentioned that I feel that the things that I have gone through happened to me, or I had to experience them so I can relate to people. And I'm going to be honest with you, until I read that comment, I kind of forgot because I probably blocked it out of my mind because it was not a fun experience. I had to sell my plasma. My God, please don't let my mom ever hear this. She will freak out. Because I told her I was just doing it for fun. I lied. I'm a big fat liar. I told her I was doing it for fun and I wanted to help people, and they paid. And so that was a win-win, and I had nothing else to do because I've been unemployed since November. And we're in August. I still have no money. But God is good. But that was a hard moment. That was a really hard moment. And, I think about that, and honestly, it kind of like makes me also feel, should I talk about that? Golly, how raw do y'all want me to be on here? Because I feel like I am the kind of person where I'm just going to let it all out. If you don't like realness, get off of this podcast. I'm going to tell you how it made me feel. At the time that I went to sell my plasma, it really, to be honest, was, I don't remember what month. I want to say it was maybe like around December, January. In December, I spent like a lot of money, more than I should have, because I didn't have any income. But I spent money for Christmas gifts, obviously. And it was my first Christmas with my boyfriend at the time, who was the covert narcissist that I mentioned. We're not even going to talk about my Christmas gifts. And don't get me started on my birthday gifts. My birthday's in February, and oh no, we got so much to talk about. So Christmas, I bought like some gifts. So I think this was like in January. And my now ex, but boyfriend at the time, he told me that he was going to help me, like with my bills and with my mortgage. And there were other expenses. And in fact, I was paying for his things like a car insurance or a vehicle. Or listen, when I tell you that I made stupid decisions, number one, but also I don't really fault myself because I was fooled. I was conned. The man is a con artist. The man is a scammer. Allegedly. But I also have proof of stuff sitting on my kitchen counter right now that evidence is pretty hard. But we're not going to talk about that. That will be another episode for another day. But I have to say that part of the reason that I'm in such a difficult financial situation right now is because of the situation that he put me in. And his words were just words. There was no action. But I remember telling him like, hey, I think I'm going to sell my plasma. And looking back, I'm in therapy right now. So I have only been to a few sessions. So this might get a little bit real. Looking back, I'm like, If I had a partner that had a need like that, I would never. The man was working supposedly overtime. Come to find out now hindsight is 2020. And also like when you're in an abusive relationship and someone who's psychologically abusing you, you cannot see clearly, honest to goodness. And if you have anybody in your life that is telling you that they are being abused, even if you cannot see the bruises, trust me, they are not lying. Well, let me not say that they're not lying because I don't know everybody's situation, but it does something too. I'll just leave it at that. But I could not see clearly. But looking back, I'm like, if my partner ever told me that they were in such a financial bind that they felt that they needed to sell their plasma to like make ends meet to put gas in their car, I would be like, but let's go to Sheetz and get a milkshake while we're at it. You're going through a tough time. And I know that if I was in your situation, you would do the same for me. That's what a normal person says. And if somebody's not doing that for you, whether they're a narcissist or not, get out of that situation. I don't care if you're a male or a female. I do not care. Get out of a situation where you cannot fully trust your partner to have your back in your moment of the biggest need of your freaking life. And that is like one tiny aspect of what I was going through at that time. No, oh, goodness gracious. So I cannot fault myself. I'd really try to not self-blame. I really should talk to my therapist on that. I feel like that's probably like the biggest thing that I struggle with. But like, how could I have been so blind? But you know how I was so blind? Because I truly loved him. And he made me feel in moments, it's such psychological games. And we're going to talk about that. What was I saying? I got off topic and I don't want to get off topic. We're here to talk about finances, and I'm going to get back to why I named the podcast what I named it. But I had to sell my plasma, or I felt that I needed to sell my plasma. And if I'm being honest, I feel like I didn't sell my plasma to necessarily make ends meet. I sold my plasma because I was holding on to what little bit of money I had because I didn't know how long I would be in the situation with no income. And thank God that I did hold on to everything, because I'm still in that situation here as we talk in August. But I feel that I sold my plasma just have like a little backup cash on hand. And I remember they paid like $80 for your first visit. But if you went, I don't remember how many times. I don't remember how many times in a row if you went, but they would have gave you $600. And I remember telling my ex, my boyfriend at the time, like, hey, that made me feel really yucky. I felt really yucky to do that. And I'm not judging people who have addictions. I know that they're very difficult to break. That's why they call them an addiction. So I'm not judging anybody, but I felt very yucky to be there. And I try to be positive and I don't know. I felt a lot of things, but what I remember telling my boyfriend at the time was that made me feel like I prostituted myself, because I literally sold my body for money. And yeah, it was just blood, right? Or plasma. I don't freaking know. And obviously it was legal. And obviously, it wasn't morally wrong. But I had to, I got to the point where I felt like I needed to do something desperate. Desperate times call for desperate measures. And for $80, that really affected me. So, and I remembered crying and telling him, like, I felt like I prostituted myself, and I remember being upset, and so I did not feel good after that experience. And I remember him telling me we're gonna get into the narcissist. It wasn't an immediate, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry, you never have to do that again. We're gonna talk about narcissism later. But he eventually got to the point where he was like, no, you don't have to do that anymore. Don't go back. And I remember telling him, like, well, even though it made me feel yucky and it made me feel like I prostituted myself out, I don't know if that's derogatory. If that's derogatory terminology, I don't mean it in that way, and I'm not trying to be offensive, so I'm really sorry, but that's the word that I know. But I sold my body for cash. That's what I know. And I remember him telling me, oh, you don't have to do that anymore. And I'm like, well, how can I trust you? Because you've told me that you're going to take care of me up to this point and you haven't. I have like, he told me to like, I could keep like tabs on what he owed me. He owed me stuff. And I remember telling him, like, how can I trust you? Oh, you can trust me. Long story short, I couldn't trust him. And because I didn't go back in the time frame, because you had like, I think you had like a month or maybe 2. If you went like once a week, I think for like 8 weeks straight or 6 weeks, something like that, you would have got a total of $600. I mean, imagine, that's a lot of money when you got nothing coming in and a lot going out. And I'll talk about that more, not right now, but there was a lot going out, and $600 would have been almost almost enough to pay like a mortgage bill. So that was a big deal, and I trusted him, and he was like, no, you don't have to do that, blah blah blah. Long story short, he didn't. But so now when I think about it, I not only feel yucky, but I'm also like, I felt yucky for $80. If I felt yucky for 600, okay, you know what? I can deal with it a little bit better maybe. But all that to say, good grief. If you're new here, I talk in circles, but I will get back to it eventually. Also, I'm winging this one too. I have no notes. We're winging this until I can get a little bit more organized. But circling back to that video that I posted about, wearing a uniform, cleaning up your uniform, and honest to goodness, if you're not going to be a good representative of Jesus, just pretend to not wear the uniform and keep your mouth shut. It's kind of how I feel about it. So going back to that video, someone had commented like, oh, well, I will wear my uniform when I don't have to sell my plasma to make ends meet. And I remember I mentioned in my last podcast that I feel like I've been through things so that I can relate to people. And I had honestly blocked that situation out of my head because it wasn't a fun experience and I didn't like to do it. And it made me feel yucky. And in so many ways, it made me feel yucky. It made me feel upset. It made me feel a lot of things. And then when I read that comment, I was like, oh, I felt all those things again. And you know what, though? It was right after I saw that comment, right after I recorded the first podcast. And do y'all remember in that first podcast, I was saying I felt like I've had to go through things so I can relate to people. And when I read that man's comment, it was a reminder from God. You are right. You went through this crap so that you can relate to the person who has had to sell their freaking plasma to make ends meet. When I tell you that never, ever, never, ever in this lifetime would I have thought that I would have to say that I've had to sell my plasma to make ends meet. Are you kidding me? I never would have thought. I literally never. Can you hear my tears in this microphone? Probably. I never would have thought that. And I never in that moment of like feeling yucky, feeling gross, feeling like I felt. And even feeling like that after, and then feeling mad or frustrated and upset and disappointed that the person that told me that they were going to give me the money so that I didn't have to do that anymore. And I felt like I missed an opportunity at that point because I didn't go back because I trusted somebody that I should have never trusted in. You know, when I was in that moment, I didn't realize that God was using that. I didn't realize that however many months later, God is going to be like, now you can literally relate to this person in a way that you never could have related to them before. And that's such a little thing, you know, it's just like a comment, but I could say like, hey, I've been there. And I don't know, they don't know that I've had to sell my plasma, and they don't know to what extent I've been there. He probably just thought, oh, well, yeah, you probably went through a rough time or whatever. But what I'm telling you is that number one, God uses your experiences so you can reach other people. We've already learned that in podcast number 1. Podcast number 2 is that God supplies all your needs. And that's what I kind of try to tell that guy. And this is honestly one good thing about surrendering to do this stinking podcast that I don't want to be doing. Actually, it's kind of fun. It's just editing. Does anybody want to edit this mess? Because I don't have fun with that. That part's not fun. It takes entirely too long. I hate technology. But you know what? Even in that situation, that really difficult, not fun situation, And looking back on it, I didn't realize at the time. But when I read that guy's comment last night, I was like, you know what? And so episode number 2 is going to be about God provides your needs. And he doesn't necessarily provide your wants. Because if I'm being honest, all I wanted to do, and I still got that $80 gift card somewhere. There's still like maybe $10 on it. I'm a penny pincher. I mean, sometimes I can not be. I'm very good with keeping up with money. Like, I don't like to spend frivolously. I don't know if I pronounced that right. I don't like to spend frivolously, so I can make it last if I need to. And honest to goodness, that's why I've been able to survive since November to August, because without a penny coming in, because I've been able to make it last, and God has made it last. That's a fact. That is number 1, is that God has provided. And number 2 is that God also gives us the means. And that is kind of the point that I want to make about the plasma story, right? Like, God says he'll provide our needs. But the Bible also says if you don't work, you don't eat. You know, sometimes nobody wants to go to work, right? I think that's such a big thing that people say about God. Like, oh, well, if God can do this, then why do you have to do that? Well, if God's going to provide all my needs, why do I have to go to work? Well, not only because does the Bible say if you don't work, you don't eat, but also it's the same as when people say, oh, well, if God is a great healer, then why do you need to go to the doctor? Like, in fact, someone had posted a video about how they were deconstructing. So like they were leaving Christianity, I guess, because they had like gotten sick or so. Oh, I think they had gone to, I don't remember. It was some random person on the internet. But it was like they were saying basically that they were deconstructing and leaving Christianity because they had been advised in like Christian counseling and they weren't given medication or something to that effect. And they were upset by that because I guess they really needed medication. And I posted like, hey, there's nothing wrong. There's nothing wrong with needing Jesus and medication. And I don't care what anybody says, that is true. And I'll tell you why. First of all, and that's kind of leading into, I'm getting back to the plasma situation, but you know, yeah, God is a healer. God is a healer. Do not get it twisted. God heals and God makes whole again. I mean, it's crazy what he can do. However, he also gave us these little things, brains, for a reason, right? He gave us people who are intelligent enough to figure out how to chop somebody's leg open, put like a metal ball in it, connect it to your bones, and now you have a knee replacement. Also, I think about that all the time. That, or like wisdom teeth surgery, or like brain surgery, literally all the things that we can do. Like, who was the first person to be like, I'm willing to try it out. Let's give it a go. Let's see if it works. You know, I think about that. But God gave people intelligence to be able to say like, hey, what if, think about that. Think about the person who first was like, my knees hurt. What if I put a metal ball inside, and what if it works? I mean, someone had to first think of that. And then other intelligent people had to first like figure out how to do it. And then other intelligent people had to perfect it. And then other intelligent people do that every day. So yeah, God heals, but God also gave us brains for a reason. And he gave us doctors for a reason, because while God can heal, he also doesn't want us to be, I don't want to say stupid. Let me just say for my listeners, if I say stupid, I'm not calling you stupid. Okay. I don't want anyone to be like overly sensitive. If you're overly sensitive, this podcast is probably not for you, because I'm just a little too straightforward. But don't be dumb, right? Like, if you need medication, go get medication. If you need surgery, go get surgery. Yes, God can heal you. And yes, you know what? On the flip side of that, God is the one that has got in the hand of that medical provider. God is the one that gave somebody the intelligence to say and think, hey, what if we put these chemicals together and now we make a medication? How about that? That's something crazy to think about, right? Did you know that Luke in the Bible was a physician? So, no, there's nothing wrong with that. And just because God can heal doesn't mean that we cannot also have medication or therapy or whatever it is that we need. God gave us brains for a reason. And so to that same kind of line of thinking, this is how I think. I consider myself like very middle ground, right? There's a lot of people who are like, ooh, no, only Jesus. And then there are other people who are like, ooh, no, only medication. I'm very middle ground, like honest to God, on everything, like on politics, on the only thing I am not middle ground is on Jesus. He is the way, the truth, and the life, and no man goes to God except through him. And that's the only thing that is a non-negotiable for me. And everything else, I'm pretty much really middle ground. I like to have an open mind, and I like to see both sides of the story. I like to consider both perspectives on literally anything. I mean, from UFOs and aliens to, oh my goodness, should we talk about conspiracies? Not today. We're not ready for that. But I really am consider myself very open-minded on so many topics. But going back to the plasma thing, you know, that guy was like, well, God's not providing my needs. But you know, if you stop and think about it, God is providing your needs, and it sucks. And it's not the way that you want God to provide your needs. You don't want to have to go to sell your plasma. No, that's really horrible. And literally from experience, I can say that no, that is a horrible way to have your needs met. But at the same time, thank God that you live in a country that you can sell your plasma and make freaking money for it. There's a thought, you know, nobody wants to get up every day and go to work. Work is not fun. I mean, you might work at a fun place, but would you rather be in the mountains of Arizona? Are they mountains or are they like rock formations? It's beautiful. That is probably one of my favorite places, is the state of Arizona. So cool. But would you rather be at work, or would you rather be doing literally anything else? I mean, the fact of the matter is that nobody wants to go to work, but we know that that's a way that we can have our needs met. That's a way that we can get money. That's a way that we can pay our bills. And that's a way that we can have the things that we want. God never said, I'm going to meet your needs while you sit back on a boat sipping pina coladas all day. And it sucks when you're in a position and you have to do things worse than go to work to be able to make ends meet. But the fact of the matter is that if you have a way to get there, right? God is providing a way to get there. Is a friend taking you? Do you drive yourself? Are you taking public transportation? Do you have a bicycle? Do you have legs that work and walk? If you don't have legs that work and walk, do you at least have a wheelchair or a scooter? And you get to that plasma center and you're able, and you have the time and you have the ability to sit there for entirely too long. When I say it's not fun in all of the ways, it's so many bad things about it, but also the waiting is a torture in itself. But thank God that you have that means of making a little cash so that you can make ends meet. Now, would you probably rather not do that? Again, from experience, absolutely 10 out of 10. No one wants to do that. No one wants to do that. But if you have to do it and that's how you can make your ends meet, God's providing that. God is providing that. And then on the flip side, because I'm sure that there's somebody listening right now that's like, well, I sell my plasma and it's still not enough. I get that too. But here is the thing. What is your heart attitude? There's a couple things to consider, right? Number one, are you in a situation because at some point, or you're continuing to live in sin and or disobey God? Straight up, I can tell you that for me, the reason that I am in a difficult financial situation right now is because I was in a relationship unequally yoked, and that person turned out to be a covert narcissist, and I am reaping the damages of those decisions that I took, that I knew good and well that I should not be in an unequally yoked relationship. I was warned. I knew in my heart. I did it anyways. And now I'm unfortunately reaping the benefits of that. So that's one thing to consider. Are you in a difficult situation because of maybe something that you had a part in? And that's really hard to say out loud. So I'm sure it's really hard to hear, but that's a fact. Sometimes we're in difficult situations because at the end of the day, we may have played a role in putting ourselves in those situations. Are we obeying God? Are we following his plan for us? The second part, though, is that not every bad situation is because of something that you did wrong. Not every situation is a punishment. Not every situation is a learn this lesson type thing. Sometimes, and honest to goodness, a lot of times, people are dealt bad hands. Sometimes people are dealt bad hands since the moment that they're born. They've had a difficult life, and I think there's two parts to that. Number one, how hard are you working to get yourself out of that situation? And I'm not talking about just work. I'm talking about an abusive relationship. I'm going to talk about that because that's fresh on my mind because that's what I just got out of. But at the end of the day, like, do you recognize that you're in an abusive relationship and you're like, well, I'm here now and I love this person, I'm just going to stick around? Or are you like, wait a second, let me learn as much about this as I can and let me make this make sense and let me educate myself so that it makes it easier for you to get out of that situation? Or if you're in a tough financial situation, you know what makes me freaking cringe? This is going to make people mad and I'm so sorry, but I cannot freaking stand it. Look at these nails. Look at these nails. These are hand painted nails, okay? They're kind of cute. Okay, these nails, you know, I have had my nails done maybe twice since I lost my job, and neither time did I pay for it. But people get on here and they're like, oh, I'm poor, oh, I don't have any money, oh, times are so tough, oh, I can't buy a house. You know why? Because you're spending $90 on nails and $10 at Starbucks at least twice a week, some of y'all more than that, and then you wonder why you don't have any money. First of all, should we talk about being good stewards of what God has given us? If you got money to spend at Starbucks, by all means do it. If that's a priority in your life, by all means do it. But then don't go and turn around and complain that you don't have money for your bills or for X, Y, and Z or for whatever the case because you're spending money eating out at Panama Jack's every other day. Is that a restaurant? I think I was trying to say Jack in the Box, which I don't have that even near my house. I don't know why that came into my mind. So are we doing things that are keeping us in a situation that we're in? That is one of my points. And then the other point, and I think the main point sincerely, is if you're in a difficult situation, and let's just say financially for this, we're trying to talk about that. This episode is if you're in a difficult financial situation specifically, one, is it something that you've done to cause it? And is it something that you're doing to keep yourself there? And number three is if you're in a difficult situation, and it doesn't have to just be financial, what is your heart attitude towards God? And I'm not hating on that guy that commented. I know that's really difficult. And if he's been doing it for a long time, I can only imagine what else he's gone through, because to get to that point is not fun. And I just really feel for all the people that are in there, because you can tell that they're not having the easiest time, and they've probably not had the easiest life. And if they've had an easy life, they're not in an easy moment right there. So I feel bad for them, and God only knows what they're going through. But your situations can make you better, or they can make you bitter. And are you in that situation? Are you getting mad at God? Are you mad at God like this? I'm not wearing the uniform, and I'm not going to represent God, and I'm not going to be proud of him, and I'm not going to love him because he's not meeting my needs in the way that I want my needs to be met. Because you just got an $80 gift card for donating plasma and sitting there for entirely too long. Are you going to use that as an excuse to not serve God because he's not doing things in the way that you would prefer that they be done? I mean, if that's the case, really all of us could say, well, God doesn't let me sit on my couch and eat potato chips all day because I got to get up and go to work. Well, God is providing through that job a paycheck. God is providing through those plasma service financial means to make ends meet. And it might not be enough, and times might be tough, but when things are overwhelming, that's when you most should lean on God. And that's what he wants from us, is to most lean on him. Are you turning to God? Are you asking for his help? Are you using your situation to reach other people? Are you recognizing the grace and mercy that God is having on your life in those difficult circumstances? I think we've probably all heard the analogy, or if we haven't, I've overheard it. So I'll share it with you. You know, people say like, take an egg, right? And you can, is it egg? Let me think. I had to Google it. So you take carrots, put it in boiling water, an egg, put it in boiling water, and coffee beans, and put it in boiling water. Let them boil the same amount of time. What happens? The carrots that were once hardened, once they've been in the boiling water, they come out soft, right? The egg that was once really fragile is now hardened on the inside. And the coffee beans are now delicious. Okay, now we're adding sugar and we're drinking that down. All of those three items went into the same situation, the boiling water. But that situation affected each of them differently. And so, kind of to that point, are you letting your situation make you better or make you bitter? Because you can go into a tough situation financially. You can go into a tough relationship where you're literally getting abused on a daily basis. Like, those are the things that you can decide, I'm going to be mad at God, or I'm going to use this in my life to lean more on God. Am I gonna make my dependence on God even bigger now because I realize that I am in over my head, or I'm in a situation that I cannot control and I cannot change it no matter how bad I want to? Are you gonna let that situation make you angry at God, or are you gonna let it help you realize how much you need him in your life? And so I think about that. There's a lot of times where we go through things and maybe it's not the way that we want it, and maybe it's not the way that we would do things. But number one, your situation is going to help you relate to somebody else. No matter how good and no matter how bad you are, God, if you let him, will use that for you to reach somebody else and to share your testimony about him on the other side. And number two is really recognizing that we need to depend on him, because without him, we can do nothing. We can do nothing. And then the third is recognizing that his ways are not our ways. Nobody wants to go to work. Nobody wants to sell their plasma. But at the end of the day, he will meet your needs. If you're his child and you are walking with him, or you're walking with him, he will meet your needs. Are your needs your Amazon shopping cart? Maybe. They might be. No, they're not. Your needs are food and shelter, and that's it. And that's scary. That's really scary. That's really, really scary. But are you going to let your situation make you better, make you bitter, and fully lean on God? Baptist to Believer. We're back at that. Let me tell you why I named this podcast Baptist to Believer. I was raised in a very conservative church and school. I also went to a very conservative Christian college. I briefly mentioned that, but there's so much more. I was listening back to the examples. I'm like, I didn't even give y'all the best examples. Like, one time I got in trouble because lady told me that I needed to go make my own pantyhose. Or one time I got in trouble for indirect contact. I know you don't know what that means unless you went to a similar school. So this is at college, right? You're college age. Just imagine this. This is wild. I got in trouble for indirect contact with a guy. He wasn't my boyfriend. We were crushing though. Indirect contact because we were like at church or something, and he was holding the hymn book, but he was holding with one hand and I was holding like the other side of the book with my hand. Like, we're holding the same book, right? We're sharing a hymnal. Lord have mercy. Well, I got in trouble for indirect contact. I got demerits, which is like a point system. And if you get too many demerits, and you get kicked out of the school. I got demerits one time because I painted a very thin strip of my hair. And I also convinced all my friends to do it. There was probably like 10 or 12 of us. We all painted like a little strip of our hair. This big, that's it. Painted it pink. We painted it there so we could like kind of hide it. And I got in trouble. The reason that we painted it pink was for October breast cancer awareness. And I got in trouble. Nobody else got in trouble. I was the only one to get in trouble. I'm lucky like that. That is the literal story of my life. I've gotten in trouble for so many things that nobody gets in trouble for. That's okay. So that's just like some of the like visual things. Like, one time I got in trouble because I had black nail polish on, and they were like, that's not natural. That's not a natural color. Is red a natural color of nail polish? Because that wasn't a color you would get in trouble for. Things like that. And so the church and school and the university that I went to were extremely like rules based, all these things. Golly, I could talk forever about. I got stories, and they're like the dumbest stories, but they're funny because they could not be more ridiculous, the things that I would get in trouble for and the ways that I learned to be rebellious. So That's also not a good thing. This is why too I say I'm in the middle ground. I'm in the middle ground on a lot of things because I have learned that when you're an extremist in one way direction or another, it causes such a rebellious like reaction. And somebody can stay like that for a while, but then it will eventually like explode. So my family wasn't really like that conservative. I mean, they were pretty strict, I guess, but I'm grateful for it. Like it wasn't anything extreme. I mean, it was a Christian home and I had rules, obviously, but the school and the church was just wild. So, but it was Baptist. It was a Baptist church and school, and then the college, the university that I went to, like the college that I went to, I don't know if it was associated as Baptist, but it had to have been because the only people who were like allowed to come speak at my Christian school to promote their colleges were people who had like the same like fundamental Bible believing, oh God, it's so cringy, like mindset and belief as they did. So if it didn't have Baptist in the name, but it definitely was. And I don't have any problem with Baptist. Like, to be honest, I feel like my faith more aligns with that. But the reason that I have named this podcast From Baptist to Believer, and if you follow me on social media, it's also From Baptist to Believer. The reason is because when I was in school and I went from started ministry. I mean, I was very involved. Like I was in sports at my school. I was in choir. I was in all of the things that I was a cheerleader. I was all the things that you could be involved in at that church and or school that you could imagine. Like I worked on a bus ministry. I would pick up kids. We would bring them to church. We would feed them. I mean, it was like an all day event. It was like one of the most fun things that I ever did. I love that. And that really ignited my passion and for like the Latino community, because before I was actually pretty racist towards them. That's another story for another day. Fun fact about me. Now I wish that I was Mexican. Isn't that ironic? Funny how God works. Like when I say I'm the epitome of God changes your heart, God changes your heart. So, but I was really involved in my church. And then I mentioned in my last podcast that in my last episode that I ended up going to Brazil as a missionary. And so, and let me just also say I'm really grateful for the education that I got, the Christian education that I got, and I'm grateful for all the people who had a part in my younger life, because I would have been an absolute wild child if I did not have that amount of structure. It was a little bit extreme, and I think that most people had their heart in the right place. Not everybody, but I think most people had their heart in the right place, and I'm really grateful for those experiences. But when I moved back, I went to Brazil as a missionary. I mean, before I went to Brazil as a missionary, I started like ministries in my church. I started like an ESL program, where we would like talk to people. We would teach them English, but then also obviously like sprinkle the Bible in at the end of it. We did like children's ministry for the kids while the parents were upstairs learning. So that was really cool. I was doing ministry in Brazil for 3.5 years. I plan to retire from doing that. That's another story of why I came back here. And when I came back, I had a lot of church hurt. We'll get into that. But I started to shift and say like, look, I'm not going to church anymore. I moved back from Brazil because it was against my will, first of all. And that was a consequence of sin, just straight up. Was it handled the best? No. Was it a fair consequence? Not in my opinion. But again, everything happens for a reason. But that was a consequence of sin. And then when my church found out that I was a sinner, surprise, surprise. I know that's a big shocker that a human would be a sinner. But when my church found out, it was like a really humiliating situation that I had to go through. And even after doing that, like I feel like I want to tell you right now, but I'll probably just talk about it next time because I think this is getting long already. And someone who has, gone as far as to the mission field, dedicated my life to mission, started ministries. And I'm not saying that to build myself up. What I'm saying is that I was not your average, like I go to church on Sundays kind of Christian. Like I was involved. I was dedicated to the Lord. But When I tell you right now that God has been more real to me since November of 2023 than I have ever known in my entire freaking life. And my only regret is that I did not really truly prioritize getting to know him. And not only that, not only prioritize trying to get to know him, because I would try to read my Bible. I would read my Bible. I would pray. I would study. I would be teaching God's word. I had like discipleship classes. I mean, I did so many things. I was in full-time ministry. And I never knew God in the way that I know him right now. I have never felt his presence like I feel him now. And the irony of that is that I have never felt so freaking alone in my life. But the one person that I know is so real is God. And I do not care if none of my enemies ever see this. In fact, I hope that y'all are watching. Y'all know what y'all put me through. Y'all know what you put me through. And you know the things that you did behind my back that I will never know about. But I hope that this is a testimony to you, to my enemies, to the people who try to take me out, to the people who want me dead, to the people who want to see me fail, to the people who want to see me destroyed completely and lose everything, and to the people and to the person who want to mess me up psychologically and abuse me. To all of y'all, I hope that you hear this podcast. If nobody else hears this podcast, I hope that every single one of you hear and you hear how big my God is. My God is so big and he is so powerful. And you know what is the craziest part? Is that he loves you too. He loves you too. And it doesn't matter what you've done. And it doesn't matter. He is bigger than all that, and he's ready and he's willing to forgive you, and he can give you fulfillment, and he can give you love, and he can give you joy, true deep down joy, because I know every single one of y'all are unhappy. Every single one of y'all that did stuff to me, I know that you're unhappy because I've spent time with you. And that's probably part of why you hated me so bad, because I have a joy that, honest to God, I can't even explain. And I wasn't even my best. I wasn't even close with God. But he put a joy, a light inside of me that I cannot hide. God is the light. And he loves you. And he wants you to know him too. I really need to record a podcast where I tell y'all how to get saved. But I'm just going to say right now, if you don't know how to do that, go to my social media, go to TikTok, and watch my pinned video. I'm wearing an orange shirt, and that is all you have to do to accept Jesus as your Savior. That's literally it. And from then on that, and if you truly mean it, he is going to transform you. And you might not feel some kind of way. I mean, I'm telling you right now, I thought I was Christian my entire life, and I just now feeling him in as of the last several months. But what I'm telling you right now is that God is real. And so why my podcast and why my social media handles are From Baptist to Believer, and my YouTube channel and all that stuff. Why is it From Baptist to Believer? Because I literally shifted from being a religious Baptist person focused on what to do and what not to do and what God can do and what God can't do. You know what God can't do? Literally nothing God cannot do. God can do whatever he wants to. If God wants to give visions, he can give visions. If God wants you to speak in tongues, he'll let you speak in tongues. That's your spirit communicating with the Spirit of God. Who are we to put God in a box? Who are we to put God in a box? The Spirit of God that created the heavens and the earth, that created you and me. How on this planet are we as Christians saying, oh, God can do anything. Oh, God can do this and God can do that. But he can't do the things that his word literally says that he can and will do? Why are we like that? We have to get out of the middle ground. The middle ground is fine for literally every single viewpoint on this planet except for who God is. We cannot be lukewarm Christians. And so from my experience, ever since that day, I have been having experiences with God that I cannot explain. And to be honest, good grief, I have really spilled my guts between the last podcast and this one. I mean, it's only going to get more real, but I feel like I've just put all my cards out on the table, and you're going to know me better than everybody's going to know me. Literally everybody's going to know me. But at the end of the day, you need to know God. You need to know God. Because when I tell you that if you open your mind and you take your mind out of religion and you stop trying to put God in a box, and you stop trying to say, well, my preacher told me this. Well, what does the Bible say? What does God himself say? Because God is never changing, and God has given us his literal word. You know what that means? He gave you his word. He gives you his word. If somebody gives you your word, and they're perfect like he is, that means what they mean, what they say, and they say what they mean. I love people like that. And that's hard to find. And maybe that's why people have such a hard time trusting in God, because people are so messed up. Even Christians, they say one thing and they do another. People cannot be trusted. God can be trusted though. He has put in his word exactly who he is and exactly how he operates, and why in the world we are limiting him. Who are we to limit God? We should be ashamed of ourselves. We should be ashamed of ourselves, but we should pause and we should recognize that God's ways are not our ways. And every denomination that's like, oh, this God can do this, but God can't do that. And God does this, but he don't do this anymore. Does it say that? Because when I'm reading my Bible, God is very real. And when I was doing ministry and I was in church and I was on the mission field and I'm reading my Bible, I got to be honest, I was reading it to read it. And I was reading it with a different kind of like understanding. I was reading it, trying to read it with like a more like theological understanding, or like, and I still like that. I do still like that. And I like to know like what's the historical and what is this word. I mean, if you watch my videos, you'll know like I like to Google and I like to learn and I like to make sure that the words, what does this mean? Or can you believe that? Or like, what is that? That's how I like to study the Bible. I like that. But at the end of the day, a part of your brain has to be like, God is so much bigger than we can think or imagine. God is a spirit. God is a spirit. And he cannot be put in a box, and we should not be putting him in a box. So I have moved from being a religious person, from a Baptist, to a true believer in Christ, because he is moving in my life. He speaks to me in ways that I literally never imagined or thought possible. God is real. And if you're in a mediocre or a lukewarm relationship with him, get right with him. Get right with him. Because not only does he say he will spew the lukewarm out of his mouth, he does not like that. But you know what other reason? You know what other reason you should stop being lukewarm? Because, okay, let's go ahead and start sounding crazy. Podcast number 2, I do not care. Jesus is coming back soon. Do you want him to come back? And when you're face to face with him say like, I'm so ashamed. You had so many opportunities to know me, to truly share me with other people, but you didn't do that. You were too busy being lukewarm. You were too busy doubting who I am. You were too busy believing in your denomination or what your pastor says than my own words, than who I'm telling you that I am. How much more can you reach other people for God when you stand up and you be who God called you to be? I mean, I just spent all of episode 1 and most of episode 2 telling you how life is uncomfortable. And it's even more uncomfortable when you start talking about Jesus in the mix. It is uncomfortable. He died on the cross for us. He died on the cross for us. He did not have to do that. He loves us. The literal least that we can do is stop putting him in a box and start living for him. Anywho, I say it all with love. I get passionate when I talk, but I promise you that I'm saying every single word with love, and I'm not telling you anything that I have not already lived and experienced and felt myself. Listen to this podcast and do it because you don't want God to handle it. Take it from me. It's a lot worse. Make the change on your own, people. Oh, Lordy mercy. Well, anywho, I hope you enjoyed this podcast. Like, subscribe, all the things, share, follow, comment. Let me know what you think. What do you want to talk about next? And I hope to see you back for episode 3. Jesus loves you.